public commentary one more time before we get to the other matters. We're almost done, so hang in there.
Wow, what an amazing meeting. There was so much meat in today's meeting, I can't believe it. I even took notes, and I wish I had them date stamped, because I got something about the messenger. But I do have a question about, oh, sorry, Diane Holland, 26 North Ridgecrest. About the resolutions, authorizing creation of an engineering inspection fee account for St. E's. Is that because we're expecting development soon? Has the property sold? Why do we end up with this?
So, well, would you like to? Okay.
I'll just say, the Sisters of Charity have a pump station on their property that comes up to us. The pump station is failing.
It's way down at the bottom.
Correct, it has to
But
go-
that's actually in Florham Park. isn't
Right,
it?
and it's got to come all the way up to our
Yeah.
Woodland Sewer Treatment Plant. We have had many issues with the effluent coming from them being stale, some other issues because of their failing sewer treatment plant, or their pump station.
Right.
That needs to be redone. What their Sisters of Charity, they really want to get out of the sewer business. It serves the college itself, the Sisters of Charity, Morris County Golf Course, and the Villa property across on Park Avenue.
That pump station
Serves all those entities.
and the golf course too, is that what you said?
It does, yes.
It comes under Punch Bowl,
And goes into their pump station and comes up to us.
and that pump station has been leaking for
Right,
15
so-
years.
They would like us to take that pump station over. We have told them that we would never take it over unless they built it to our standards. So they have put together a plan, and this fee, which is about $12,000, is to review their plans to see if it meets our standards. And then the township committee would have to make a decision at that point if we should take over that pump station. But with the developments going down there, it's not going to take on any additional development off Park Avenue, just what is on the Sisters of Charity property there. So it would be economically beneficial to us, and also for us to run it, because then we know that the flow coming in is good. One of the issues that we had, that we can't directly contribute to them, but we think it's a major source, is we had to replace all of the sewer lines along Madison Avenue and down Old Glen Road in the last several years because of the acid that was in there and kind of destroyed the pipes. So it gives us better control.
So this has nothing to do with their potential development?
No.
All right.
And this is something that the sewer committee has discussed at length. This is the kind of discussions that we do have. But just to educate the public a little bit, if I could take 10 seconds. We usually like to have sewage flow by gravity, right? Most of sewage flows by gravity to our sewage plants, but there are certain areas in town where there's a hill where you actually need a pump station to pump it up over a hill, where then gravity takes over and brings it to the sewage plant. We have a number of pump stations around town that do that for us, and this is one that brings the effluent to our Woodland plant.
Well, living so close to St. Elizabeth's, I'm concerned when I start seeing inspection fees in terms of, is development coming soon? That was what brought it up.
This is to make.
Understood. Okay, thanks for the clarification. Regarding the transportation, circulation, whatever that was, and the bit about the ordinance and the policy, who has the responsibility for developing the policy?
So that is part of the debate that you saw occur tonight on the dais. I'll let Kathy address this too, but Kathy put in, and Mark put in so much work in putting the meat on the bones for this committee that contained a lot of policy aspects as opposed to just forming the committee. That I understand Kathy's frustration in some of that work not being included, and will be included in a separate policy document. The policy document will give the initial, as I see it, will give the initial direction to the committee. And after they have that initial direction, I believe in empowering the committees to do the work that they see fit to do as volunteers for the township. And as we discussed, the people on the standing committee will be on that committee and give personal direction. But that's debate that we saw about the separation of policy versus,
But I was trying to determine if, yes, Mr. Quinn?
I think the township committee develops policy.
Okay, fine.
Does that answer your question, or?
Well,
No?
okay, no, it does. I just didn't know whether one half of the committee does policy or what, okay, no problem, it's fine.
well, we have, like we said, we have these standing committees, and the standing committees help develop policies in certain areas, but then the entire township committee has to agree upon them.
Yeah, okay. I wanted to commend the new messenger formats. Wow, they're human. They have colored pictures, they change, loved it. And it's more than just the calendar, they just all look better, and I think it's a really engaging format. I thought EDAC was wonderful. Wow. Thinking about the plastic, all right, so part of EDAC, we need a brand. This just popped into my head. If we, who knows if it's wise, but if we ban plastic bags, what's the possibility of taking that opportunity? It would cost us money, but fill all of our commercial operations with reusable bags that carry a Morris Township brand on them. See? That's applause from above. It's like, we're hollow for plastic bags or something like that. You could use that as a thing. Brand bags. Okay.
I like that idea.
I like that idea too.
Okay. And then another thing would be a brand for us, and we see this overseas in a lot of countries, is that, or cities in foreign countries, that they have town-wide Wi-Fi. And that would, I don't know what it would cost, but town-wide Wi-Fi, we wouldn't end up stigmatizing children that don't have Wi-Fi in their homes, that go to the school district. It would be aggressive for the town. So those are my comments, but what's neat there was today.
So just to address that last comment, I actually have looked at that, and I've talked to a couple people about townwide Wi-Fi, and basically years ago that used to be a great initiative when people were paying a lot of money for cell service. In this day and age, the feedback that I got from some professionals that there's no cost the cost benefit is just not there. You know, the amount of money you have to spend to reach a very small sliver of population that doesn't already have access to cellular data is, from what I've been told, this does not make it worth it. That's just some feedback that I got when I asked the question, but I did look into it.
Well, as an example, I travel regularly, and I find it really nice when I'm in a foreign country to be able to go into a little corner restaurant and they give you on their menu what their Wi-Fi is and what the password is. It's very welcoming. And we want more than just
When you come
people.
into this building, you can use the public Wi-Fi in this building.
I have always felt that it's locked. I mean, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, password.
Yeah,
I'm sorry?
You need a password.
you just need the password, that's all.
Right. Well, where is that for people who come in?
Yeah.
That's not friendly. That's
I'm not a friendly
not.
person.
Once you have.
I'm sorry?
That was
What'd you
just
say?
a joke.
You're not a
I'm not a friendly person.
I noticed. But that's not encouraging,
Okay,
all right? That's just a comment.
thank you.
Thank you for the comment. I just want to say for the municipal messenger updates, credit goes to the township staff for making those improvements on the back end and doing the graphics and all that stuff.
Great. Anybody else have any public comments? Yes, sir.
Hi, George Quillen, 7 Bishop Court. This has been a fascinating meeting tonight, and I think it should continue until it stops raining, since I didn't bring any rain gear. I do have a couple of comments and some questions. think the Township Committee has brought about this year some tremendous improvements in communication to the public. I really want to commend you on that. I think the difference from prior years has been wonderful. I think today, though, you took a bit of a step backwards, or maybe sideways, with respect to this Transportation Advisory Committee ordinance. I didn't get a chance to see it in advance because it wasn't part of the package that I guess there are 30 or so people in the township who get a nice package from Mrs. Emilio of ordinances and resolutions prior to the meeting, but this particular ordinance was not included. Maybe it was in one of the other attachments, it wasn't labeled as an ordinance.
It was in all the attachments, but also you can click through on the agenda, the way Mrs. Emilio sets up the agenda. So the draft agenda doesn't have the hot links, what are called hot links, but the agenda, the final agenda that comes out yesterday, has links to all of the resolutions and ordinances
Okay,
on the
that was
township
this morning,
website.
right? That was last night, is that happened?
All right, last night it was
All right,
posted on the
that was
website,
day.
and all the links were engaged last night so that you could engage on the website.
Okay. I agree with Mrs. Wilson's comments about the need for justification within an ordinance and for further flesh on ordinances. I think if the ordinance simply says we're establishing this committee and we'll tell you what to do, that's a mistake, and it's better to have something more specific. So that would be my vote if I were voting, which I probably never will be. But in terms of a separate policy statement, I'm not sure what the legal force of a separate policy statement is. Would that be enacted by resolution? How will that work?
Just a guideline,
It's just, yeah.
an internal document for the township committee.
Will it be voted on by the township committee?
No.
Will it be a public document that's
Yes.
put on the website?
Can be.
Doesn't seem to me like the best way to go. It seems to me it's better to have an ordinance to which the public can make comments, and then make that ordinance be sufficient to give the committee its ambit, and to have the committee come up with its own policy and its own strategic plan and its own methods of operation. So that's what I think would have been better. On the other hand, I understand there was a need for speed. Like the ordinances required 2 months to get in force, and this was something that had been waiting for a while. And if some of the members of the committee believed that it was better to get something in place more quickly, then I can understand that point of view as well. I'm really glad that the Transportation Advisory Committee is being created. I'm also glad that it's being called the Transportation Advisory Committee. So I think it will be a great addition to the planning in the town and the communication and the ability of residents to make their voices heard. So that's something that I'm really enthusiastic about. I remember when the master plan reexamination was last done, which was in spring, summer of 2017, I think.
Yeah.
At one point, the planning board had this recommendation to create a transportation advisory committee there. Then they took it out in a draft, and I was one of the people who protested and said we need to put that back in. So I'm really glad that we're reaching the final stages of creating the committee. On the subject of sidewalks, this was another matter that was discussed in the master plan reexamination report. And I was surprised to see James Street actually wasn't mentioned, but I think the James Street project is a very important project, and I would recommend that the James Street sidewalk be extended all the way down to Southfield Parkway and to the, what's it called, James Place apartment complex. I think that would be tremendous. If it has to be done in 2 stages, so be it. But I hope the first stage gets at least as far as Springbrook. And I believe that's enough for tonight. It's a very interesting meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else? Mr. Goldberg.
Yeah, Lee Goldberg, 10 Arrowhead Road. Jeff, you had said earlier that two of the new, the tax advisor, I'm sorry, the Transportation Advisory Committee, was it going to be, it's designated as a visionary committee, right, with no operational responsibilities. Is the EDAC committee as it's currently constituted now also one of those visionary committees? Do they have operational responsibilities?
They are an advisory committee, so it's Economic Development Advisory Committee. So the standing committee, which I was referring to, is the visionary committee on this township committee. The TAC is the advisory committee that's coming out of this standing committee.
Thank you. And to sort of echo Diane Holland's points in terms of, Mr. Quinn said, so the township creates the policy. I think, Jeff, you had said, if I heard correctly, you would not vote on this at second reading, wouldn't bring it to a vote unless you saw the policy. Was that accurate understanding?
Yeah, I mean, I've
So
seen,
sometime between now and
I've seen the
policy.
draft policy document, but Kathy, what? Well, what you've circulated, I shouldn't say the policy document, but I've seen draft policy circulated, what you've sent around to all of us. So I've seen some of the policy statements that you've made, but yeah, it has to be fleshed out a little bit more into an actual
So
guidance
at some
document.
point between now and the August meeting, the township committee will make contributions and create the policy. And
Yes,
then that'll be made public at some point when it's appropriate.
when it's appropriate.
It is my understanding that Mr. Quinn is creating the policy based on the information that Mark and I have provided. And
Yes,
Correct.
that is correct.
so,
So you
for
provide,
example, we provided extensive language about the rationale. We provided information about responsibilities, and, you know, I don't know what is and is not going to be included in it. That's part of what I'm looking for, is to see what the final policy document looks like. I mean, if it's just going to be the language we created, you could just put it on paper, but it's not going to be that. Am I correct?
so, and also my ears perked up a little because I heard Peter say, you know, if the policy changes, then the ordinance can change, right? So there was some fluidity in there. So I don't know if that's good best practice. As policies change, go back and change ordinances. I'm not sure. I think Mark-
That's what we're trying to get away, that's what we're trying to get away from. So if we put too much policy in the document and the policy changes, then the ordinance has to be reintroduced and voted on again. So that's nothing.
Part of my concern here was that some of the stuff that is apparently going in the policy is, in my opinion, sort of ongoing things. You know, for example, the rationale. The rationale is ongoing. It's not going to change that much. The rationale establishes the committee, or is the reason for establishing the committee, and to me, that is enduring and should be in the ordinance. None of that language was put in the existing language of this ordinance, and so I'm assuming that it's going to be in the policy, but I haven't seen the policy, so I'm not
So
sure.
we're going to have further discussion of the ordinance at the next meeting. There's going to be a full public hearing and public questioning of the ordinance itself, and the township committee will have had a chance to review the policy before we vote on that document.
You know,
As we stated earlier.
there is a mission statement,
Yeah.
right,
I don't
paragraph
want,
9.3.
I don't want to beat this to death. We've talked about
Assist
this.
in
all-
ending that misery.
Okay, we've talked a lot about this tonight. We promised to have a full public hearing at the next meeting.
Okay. My final comment on that was, I mean, Ms. Wilson alluded to the creation of the EDAC ordinance, which EDAC, ever since it was formulated, I've been following that along, trying to figure out what it is they do over the course of the years, and just looking at the ordinance to see what their roles and responsibilities are. I even just brought it up from the township website on my phone tonight, just to see. I mean, it looks like a pretty basic ordinance. Would there be a downside to just modeling how that was, what would be the downside to modeling this new advisory committee, just with the same type of language and responsibilities and things that are in that one?
But as you saw tonight, the people who you appoint to the committee are the real drivers of the work that gets done. And you saw the quality of the work based on the quality of
That's
the people who
fantastic.
have been appointed, which is fantastic. And it's the people who you appoint that really drive what the committee gets done. the committee hasn't done much for years. And the work that Kathy did, as I said earlier at the beginning of the meeting, that reinvigorated the EDAC, and with the new appointments we made have clearly made a big difference. So I look to this TAC, to Transportation Advisory Committee the same way. We're going to appoint some quality people that are passionate about the issue, and hopefully they'll take the bull by the horns and come up with a great strategic plan, like we saw tonight. And the 2 standing committee people who are going to be on the committee will give their input to that committee. And
Okay, thank you.
I view it as, like I said, the people you appoint. So the policy document is one thing, but I think the people that you appoint is even more important.
I agree. I just want to say that they did refer, in creating their plan, to the responsibilities that were enumerated in the ordinance, there was some detail there.
Correct.
And that is the challenge, getting the right level of general versus specific.
Thank you all for sharing your thought processes on this topic. The only other topic I wanted to mention is I know Jeff, Mary Mancuso, maybe others on this body as well, have had some contact with our neighboring towns in terms of traffic and movement and some discussions with the town and some events that you may have attended with other mayors. And in terms of communicating with our neighboring towns when there's going to be things that are going to be developed on a large scale that are going to impact traffic, I came to learn this week that in Hanover, right next to the Hyatt, there's a proposal that'll be held and be heard at the planning board next week in Hanover for a 5-story Marriott hotel right on Park Avenue. So I went down to look at the drawings at Hanover. I see there's a notification on the front of the application, neighboring municipalities, so I guess you received some sort of notification of this, but in instances when something this large happens, as we're trying to address what is already a failed intersection, I think many would agree at that intersection, like, do you reach out to the other mayors or councilors where you can say, let's talk about this? How does that get vetted, so to speak? I know it's their time, they can develop and do what they want, be a home rule, all that, but what's the communication?
It's not Hanover's application, it's the application of some corporate entity.
Correct.
They're not at liberty to plan with us the demise or the success of such an application.
As we discussed at the public planning land use hearing, that the learning session we had earlier, anybody is allowed to apply for any kind of application they want, and they have their day in court, so to speak, with their application. So they're going to have their day in court with the planning board. But in terms of outreach, we did have that Park Avenue corridor meeting down in Madison. What came of that is the county is taking control of that, and the engineers, everybody's assigning a person to study the Park Avenue corridor. Mr. Jim Slate, our township engineer, our municipal engineers, on that, what you call it, I don't know if I call it a task force, but a working group to look at solutions for that section of Park Avenue corridor. But just recently, Mayor Francoli of Hanover reached out to a bunch of mayors and asked if we would like to form a mayor's group to talk about issues that affect all of us. So it was very timely that just a couple weeks later, there's an application in this town. So I'm going to take that opportunity from Mayor Francoli to reach out to him and be a part of this group, and it'll be one of the things that we talk about. Because, it's a failed intersection, and I don't understand how we can add more traffic to a failed intersection.
Thank you. And the only other thing to keep in, I think, mind that I've heard mentioned at this township committee meetings before is the county and some notion, even though there's no funding for a flyover coming off of 24, dumping out onto Park Avenue. That was one of the proposed or model remedies that they were considering. And if they put a hotel there, I guess that falls away. So anything you can do to maybe find out from the county if that alters their plans, or give me a number of the Department of Transportation for the county, where I could reach out to find out how that may have impacted their study of that intersection.
Yeah, they're aware of it, but if you want to do some outreach, I mean, Chris Vitz, VITZ, is the county engineer. He was the one who put forward the plans for the flyover. And they're aware of this proposal and how it would impact the ability to put the flyover in. I mean, I don't want to speak for the rest of the committee. I was personally against the flyover. I think it just moves the traffic just a couple hundred feet down Park Avenue. That's just my personal opinion. But like I said, the working group of engineers is now going to take a look at some solutions, and we'll see where that goes.
Thank you. And one final question on the pump station over on Punch Bowl. They say that it has to be developed and built to our specifications for us to take it over, was sort of the gist of what I was hearing. But when do those specifications include just current state as is used? There's no planning going into that pump station for future potential use along that corridor?
No. They have, the College of St. Elizabeth has an allocation that's dedicated through the wastewater management plan by DEP. It's going to meet those standards. We're not looking to expand that.
So it's covering their current needs.
The current use, even
Yes.
though we know that what it's zoned for potentially future, but they don't want to address that now.
They've
So that-
already paid for significant allocation when they originally got it as a commercial user. And it's going to be that.
There's excess capacity in the plant.
So,
Oh, there is access. Oh,
and the pump station, so any development on that property would not be affected by this.
And then the pump station.
Correct.
there's excess capacity. What, for,
Yeah, they give us, when they did their allocations many years ago, they have to reserve something as a commercial user. And then what they don't use, they can keep that and reserve it, and they pay us a small portion of that. So they have a very large capacity that they previously paid sewer connection fees on that are connected to that pump station, but they don't use that, and they keep that in reserve.
And I might add that every commercial customer has excess capacity reserved, I think virtually.
For the
every-
most part,
For
right.
the most part.
Right.
They reserve excess capacity just so they'll have it if they need it.
Right.
yeah, all right. Thank you very much.
Okay, so there was a little bit of clarification to my earlier question, which had to do with who writes the policy, which seems to be what caused some of the difficulty with the transportation ordinance. So Mr. Quinn said the committee writes the policy.
Did not say that.
The committee sets the
They
policy,
set the policy.
but the administration writes the
That's
policy.
staff work.
Sets the policy. Okay, so committee members have provided their input to the administrator. Are you waiting for more input?
No.
Is there some reason why you were not able to bring it back out to the committee?
You understand my workload?
Yeah, no, that's not the point. There's a time limit, I mean, to get things done. Mr. Quinn was able to get the ordinance done for tonight as part of writing the ordinance, and we have, as we discussed tonight, we're going to have the policy document for the next meeting for discussion. But this is a priority of mine to start moving forward on this. It's something we've talked about from day one when we came on this body, Mark and I, and Kathy's talked about transportation for a couple of years now. It is a big priority, and I wanted to see it done sooner rather than later. What we said tonight is we'll see the policy document before we take a second read. But I really I'm anxious to move forward. Like I said, I want to appoint people possibly at the next meeting
I understand
if we
all
approve the ordinance. So
I
I didn't want to push it any further.
Okay. Is there something to learn from this, that ordinances and policies should come out at the same time?
I don't
I mean,
necessarily.
Well,
I mean, they are going to come out at the same time. This is just the introduction. So we're going to have a policy statement at the second reading, which
Mayor
is when the
indicated-
formal public hearing.
You indicated you wouldn't vote on the final reading unless you had the policy in your hand.
So that is when the policy, that's when the legislation gets enacted at the second read. We're just introduction here. You know, if you look at our vaping ordinance that we introduced in January, we didn't have a second vote on that till May, or was it June? Till May. So
It is my understanding that there is no other committee that has been set up this way, that is with an ordinance and then with a separate policy document. And then I heard through our sort of telephone-like communication, one-to-one, that that is not accurate. So I would ask right now for clarification, are there any other of our committees that were set up via an ordinance and a policy established at the same time?
This ordinance was drafted very similar to the open space ordinance, the park and record advisory ordinance, and historic preservation, and it also very similar to Environmental Commission ordinance, which basically follows the state statute.
Do those committees have separate policy statements that I could read?
No,
But this one will.
at your request.
No, it's not at my request, I will say.
Now, with due respect, Kathy, I don't want to rehash this
I
again.
know.
I don't want to rehash this again. I think we should end it. We made the decision. We'll have the policy document at the next meeting. I don't want to rehash this any further.
It's very interesting to listen, and you hear more as the conversation goes on, so.
Yes, and then we will continue, I promise, we will continue the conversation next month, and you will hear even
Unfortunately,
more.
I won't be here next
Oh,
month.
no.
The meeting's
Lucky-
recorded, don't worry.
Lucky for you, we record our meetings
Absolutely.
right there,
Absolutely.
and you can watch it at home.
I do. When I'm not here, I go back and I go. So
Right,
thank
but
you.
as Kathy said earlier, debate and discussion is very healthy. We don't all agree on everything. We've had, this is our third 4-to-1 vote this year, I think, I think it's 4, and the one person's always been different each time. So this is a healthy this is a very healthy governing body, I believe, in the debate and discussion we have here on the dais.
I'm not debating.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing no,
Stop rating? Rain? Is it stop raining?
maybe, that's our signal to end the meeting, right? But we still have a couple other items on the agenda, so I'm going to